It was supposed to be a simple dinner. After 7 years of barely speaking, my daughter Claire called out of the blue and invited me to her home. "Let's put the past behind us," she'd said, her voice trembling just enough to sound sincere. I baked her favorite pecan pie, put on my best dress, and drove to her sprawling suburban house. Her husband, Mark, greeted me with an exaggerated smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. The table was set like something out of a lifestyle magazine: crystal glasses, perfect candlelight, and more wine than any 3 people could reasonably drink. Halfway through dinner, my phone buzzed in my lap. An unknown number. "Stand up, walk away, say nothing to your daughter." I froze, the stem of my wineglass slippery in my hand. My eyes flicked to Claire, laughing at something Mark had said, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Then another buzz. "You're in danger. They want you drunk." "Don't sign anything." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. The voice in my head screamed to run, but my heart, my foolish, hopeful heart, whispered that this was all a mistake. It wasn't. I wasn't born into comfort. I grew up in a small Pennsylvania town where the winters were long, the factories were loud, and you learned early that no one was going to hand you anything. My father worked in the steel mill until it closed. My mother cleaned houses for people who never remembered her name. I was the oldest of 4, which meant I learned to cook, clean, and manage a household before I was even in high school. At 17, I married my high school sweetheart, Robert. He was a mechanic with a crooked smile and a habit of bringing me wildflowers he found by the road. We built a life together, humble but ours. I worked the counter at a bakery during the day and took classes at night. The bakery owner, Mrs. Harper, saw something in me and taught me everything she knew. How to make a flaky crust, how to price pastries so you didn't go broke, how to smile even when the customer was wrong. When Robert died suddenly from a heart attack at 43, I thought my life was over. We had no children at the time, by choice, and the silence of the house nearly drowned me. Then, against all odds, Claire was born 3 years later. She was my miracle, my reason to keep going. Raising her alone wasn't easy. There were nights I went without dinner so she could have enough. I sewed her Halloween costumes by hand, took extra shifts at the bakery, and sometimes fell asleep at the kitchen table, my head resting on unpaid bills. When Mrs. Harper retired, she sold me the bakery, not for market price, but for what she called a fair price for someone who'll love it as much as I did. I took out a small loan, paid her every cent, and poured my soul into that place. The community responded. Within 5 years, Harper's Bakehouse was a local favorite, and for the first time in decades, I could breathe without fear of losing it all. But success did something to Claire I didn't understand at first. In high school, she bragged about the bakery as if it were hers. In college, she asked for money that I didn't have to give. When I said no, she called me selfish, cold, even controlling. The last fight we had was the worst. We both said things that couldn't be unsaid. She left, and for 7 years, she was little more than a shadow on my Facebook feed. I told myself I didn't care, that I had my business, my friends, my life. But when that phone call came, her voice shaking, asking for peace, I felt hope spark in a part of me I thought was dead. It would take less than one evening to burn that hope to ashes. Harper's Bakehouse was more than just a bakery now. It was an institution. The storefront, once faded and chipped, gleamed with fresh paint and a polished brass handle that caught the morning sun. The smell of cinnamon and fresh bread drew customers in before they even reached the door. The morning rush had become a kind of performance. I'd greet the regulars by name, set aside a loaf for Mrs. Carmichael before she asked, and slip an extra cookie into the bag for little Ellie when her mom wasn't looking. On Saturdays, we sold out before noon. People posted about us on Instagram, tagging photos of their pecan pies and cream puffs like they were showing off a piece of art. Financially, I was finally secure. The loans were paid off. I'd invested in a small piece of property, a sunny 2-bedroom condo near the waterfront, where I lived quietly with my cat, Jasper. I traveled once a year, usually to places I'd only dreamed of when money was tight. Paris, Rome. Last summer, I even took a pastry course in Lyon, just to challenge myself. The business had grown enough that I could afford a small, trustworthy staff. Young people who reminded me of myself, hungry to learn, willing to work. I taught them what Mrs. Harper had taught me, and more. There was a quiet pride in knowing I had built something lasting, something that would outlive me. Still, there was one thing I didn't have. Claire. 7 years without her left an emptiness I couldn't fill with success, or flour or sugar. Sometimes, in the middle of icing a cake, I'd catch myself wondering what she was doing. If she ever thought of me? If she regretted the words she'd hurled like knives. I told myself I didn't need her. But when her voice came through the phone that night, asking for peace, I felt that old wound ache with a dangerous kind of hope. I didn't know it then, but all the stability I had built, the bakery, my savings, my peace, was about to be tested in a way I never imagined. The night of the dinner, I drove up to Claire's neighborhood just as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and rust. Her house was one of those oversized suburban builds, stone facade, 2-car garage, manicured lawn. The kind of place where everything looked perfect on the outside. Mark met me at the door. He was taller than I remembered, broader, his handshake firm but cool. His smile was polished like he'd practiced it in the mirror. Behind him, Claire appeared. Her hair swept back in a way that made her look older, sharper. She hugged me, awkwardly, briefly, before stepping aside to let me in. The dining table was set like a magazine spread. Crystal glasses caught the candlelight, and the plates were so white they almost glowed. The air smelled faintly of roasted rosemary chicken and expensive wine. I placed the pecan pie in the center, but no one touched it. We made small talk at first, how business was going, how their jobs were demanding but fulfilling, how the neighborhood had such a great sense of community. But there was a strange tightness in the air, like the walls were holding their breath. Claire kept glancing at Mark, as if checking for silent approval before speaking. Then Mark brought out a bottle of wine. Expensive, French, the kind I would never buy for myself. He poured my glass first, generous to the brim. Claire reached across, touching my arm. "Mom, you should really enjoy this. It's a special occasion." It felt rehearsed. Halfway through my second glass, my phone buzzed, that anonymous text. "Leave the house, now. Don't tell your daughter." My heart thudded against my ribs. I slipped the phone under the table, pretending to check the time. Another buzz. "They want you drunk. Don't sign anything." Suddenly, everything sharpened. Their 2 eager smiles, the untouched wine in their own glasses, the neat stack of papers sitting on the sideboard in the corner of my vision. Claire noticed me looking. "Oh, Mark's just got some paperwork from his job. We can move it if it's in the way." But her tone was off. Too casual. I tried to keep my hands steady as I reached for a roll. "Paperwork, huh? Must be important." Mark's smile didn't falter. "Just something we need a witness for. No big deal." The tension curled tighter in my stomach. I knew that tone. It was the same one people use before they spring a trap, sweet on the surface, poison underneath. I didn't know yet exactly what they were after. But I knew one thing for sure. The daughter who once begged me for extra spending money, the same girl I'd stayed up nights sewing dresses for, had brought me here for a reason. And whatever it was, It wasn't about reconciliation. I set my fork down slowly, forcing my expression into something neutral. If I looked rattled, they'd know something was off. The anonymous texts were still glowing in my mind, each word sharp as a needle. Paperwork, I repeated, my tone light. You know, I've always been curious about Mark's job. What exactly do you do again? He smiled that same polished smile. Financial planning, helping clients protect their assets. Claire jumped in. Mark's one of the best in his firm. They trust him with really important things. It was an odd brag, too pointed, too rehearsed. I took a sip of water, my eyes drifting toward the untouched wine in their glasses. Strange, I said, half to myself, how I'm the only one drinking. Claire laughed, a little too quickly. Oh, you know me. Wine gives me headaches. Mark didn't even bother with an excuse. He just lifted his glass in a fake toast, but didn't take a sip. I decided to press. So, this paperwork? What kind of witness do you need? Some kind of family thing? For a fraction of a second, Claire's eyes flickered, hesitation. It's complicated, but really, Mom, it's just a formality. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. Funny, isn't it? How formalities always seem to involve signatures, and signatures always seem to involve responsibility. Mark's smile tightened. You don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with, but we thought, since you're family, that word, family, landed heavy. I remembered the night she told me I was holding her back, that she needed space, the months of silence after. Family hadn't seemed to matter then. I needed to see more. I needed them to tip their hand, so I played along. Well, if it's really nothing, I don't see why I can't look at it. But I have a rule. Never sign anything without my reading glasses. I let out a small laugh. And wouldn't you know? I left them at home. Claire's face fell, just slightly. That's fine. We can go over it later. No rush. No rush, which meant there was a rush. They just didn't want to spook me. The rest of the dinner was an exercise in tension. Mark kept steering the conversation toward investments, wills, and smart asset allocation. Claire kept circling back to my bakery, how successful it seemed, whether I had a plan for the future. By dessert, I had heard enough to know something big was in motion, but I needed proof, cold, undeniable proof. When I got home, I didn't call anyone. I didn't even turn on the lights. I sat at my kitchen table with Jasper curled in my lap, replaying every word, every glance from that evening. If they were after my money, or worse, my legal rights, I couldn't just confront them. They'd deny it, cover their tracks. No, I had to make them believe I was still in the dark. Let them grow confident. Let them slip. I opened my laptop and started a new file. Operation Pie Crust. Because like the saying goes, people are just like pie crusts. You don't know how strong they are until you put them under heat. I didn't sleep. I watched the red digits of the oven clock crawl from 12:07 to 3:41 while Jasper's tail thumped against my calf in drowsy reassurance. When the sky began its shy gray, I slid the last empty pie tin off the drying rack and opened Operation Pie Crust. At 7:58 a.m., I walked into First Atlantic like I owned the building. I did not. But I did own every cent in my accounts, and that mattered more. 2 things, I told the banker in a navy tie who introduced himself as Ben. I need a credit freeze with all 3 bureaus, and I want real-time alerts for any transfer requests, wire attempts, or new signers added to my business or personal accounts. Anything suspicious, call me, then call my lawyer. He blinked at the word lawyer the way people do when they realize you're not the type to be handled. Yes, ma'am. Also, I added, Print me the signature cards on file and the list of authorized agents. When the pages slid across the desk, I saw only my name. Good, clean, for now. From the bank, I drove straight to Marshall & Dune, the midtown firm that handled my commercial lease. Laura Marshall had eaten my maple pecan pie at her wedding. She'd take my call. She ushered me in, eyes narrowing when she clocked the circles under mine. "What's wrong?" I told her enough to be smart and not enough to be paranoid. "I got a text last night during dinner. Don't stand, don't cry. Just know I believe it. If what I think is coming actually comes, I want a firewall." Laura tapped a pen against a yellow legal pad. "Asset protection, without locking you out of your own life. We can set up an irrevocable trust with a narrow temporary charter, 72 hours extendable, with you as grantor and a corporate trustee. You'll retain control of operations through management agreements, but ownership sits with a trustee. No one can sweet talk." "Do it," I said, "and draft a decoy while you're at it." Her eyebrows rose. "A pretty one," I said. "Readable, friendly, simple family planning vibe. Something a son-in-law with soft hands will think he can understand. Make the decoy transfer sound generous, but legally inert. I want it to look like a meadow and read like quicksand." Laura smiled the way litigators smile when they smell smoke from the other side's kitchen. "You really are a baker." "Layers," I said. "Flake on top, structure underneath." At home, I lined 3 items across my kitchen island: the cut glass whiskey decanter they'd insisted I try last week, a fresh spiral notebook, and my father's old Olympus voice recorder, the kind that still takes tiny tapes and sounds like truth. I held the decanter to the morning light. The whiskey threw amber petals across the ceiling. No sediment. Fine. Different bottle last night. Still, I poured a shot into a clean jar, sealed it, labeled it, Sample A, Control. I bagged the shot glass Mark had palmed for me, still in my tote from last night, unwashed. Sample B, Suspected. Then I called Dr. Santiago at the urgent care down the block. He once swapped his copay for a dozen apple turnovers. He'd remember the favor. "Bring what you have," he said. "I'll courier to a toxicology lab I trust. If there's even a whisper of a sedative, we'll find it." The anonymous number had texted, "Get up and go. Don't say anything to your son." Not my son, my daughter. So whoever sent it hadn't been guessing. They'd been careful. They knew the players, just not the nouns. House staff? A neighbor? Someone at Mark's firm? I texted back from a burner app I used for catering contracts. "Who are you?" The dots pulsed, then stopped. 30 seconds later. "Can't. They check phones. You were safe because you left." "Why warn me?" A longer pause. "Because they said you cry when you're tired? That you're soft? I watched you fix a broken mixer with duct tape and a spoon. That's not soft." My eyes stung. I blinked hard. "Thank you. If you can't talk, send me details I can verify without you. Locations, times, a name spelled wrong in a document, something only a witness would know." 2 minutes. Then, his laptop password, Claire +8. He uses her middle name. There's a folder on the desktop called Family Planning. I exhaled. "You're in danger. Be careful." "You too," the bubbles replied. He prints things before dinner. Check the home office trash night of. Then nothing. If I wanted them to bite, I'd need bait. I baked. Not to calm my nerves, though the smell of butter always corrected my breathing, but to build my trap. 4 perfect bourbon pecan tarts cooled on the rack while I typed 2 sets of documents under Laura's supervision via a secure portal. The Meadow. A friendly 5-page family advancement agreement that appeared to assign my bakery's cash flows to a joint family venture, managed by Mark for efficiency. Hidden in the fine print, no conveyance, no POA, no enforceable rights, just a promise to consider distributions. Pretty. Empty. The steel, a notarized, time-stamped assignment moving actual ownership of my bakery's IP, brand, and real property options into the trustee's hands for 90 days, renewable, a legal vault with velvet walls. Laura walked me through the sign and seal. If they push you to sign anything, stall. Use the reader's excuse again. Already packed a decoy pair, I said, placing a cheap pharmacy frame into my tote. Smudged, guaranteed. Illegal recordings? Not in New York if one party consents. I was one party. Still, I wanted eyes, not just ears. I slid a button camera into the seam of my market tote, lens peeking through a loose stitch. The recorder went into the pocket, already rolling. On my kitchen table, I laid out a script like stage notes. Ask about the forms. Let them brag. Mention accountant meeting Monday. Watch the panic. Offer dessert. If they bring out papers, take them to read under better light. Photograph every page. Do not sign. Leave the empty decanter on the sideboard. If they swap bottles again, I'll see it on playback. I texted Pastor Ruth from my neighborhood church. Half my staff still called her Boss Ruth because she recruited volunteers like a general. I might need you to stop by my daughter's tonight for a surprise dessert drop. Bring the choir kid who films everything. I'll donate to the youth retreat either way. Her reply arrived with a confetti emoji. We love a dessert ambush. What time? 7:30, I whispered to the empty kitchen. Right in the middle of the second act. Claire opened the door that evening with a smile I recognized from her prom photos. Beautiful, stage lit. Mom, you look amazing, she said, pulling me into a hug thick with perfume and apology. I brought peace offerings, I said, lifting the pastry box. Bourbon pecan. Mark, I used your favorite. He appeared from the hallway in shirt sleeves, jaw shaved too close. You're an angel, Mia. He never called me Mom. When men want your signature, they call you by the name on your ID. Dinner smelled like rosemary and control. I set my tote where the lens could see the bar cart. The cut glass decanter from last week sat there, full now. Next to it, a second bottle, identical brand, different fill line. We traded niceties long enough for the camera to forget it was watching. Then Claire cleared her throat. So, Mom? About that family planning we mentioned. Mark slid a folder onto the table, burgundy leather. Embossed, theater. Before we get into that, I said, lifting the pastry box lid, taste the glaze. I tweaked the bourbon ratio. They took bites. They closed their eyes. They forgot to hurry. People will confess to a patient ear and a good crust. Okay, I said gently, dabbing a crumb from my thumb. Show me what you brought. Mark opened the folder like a magician unveiling a dove. Inside, a slim stack of papers, a fountain pen, a notary's card. Just a simple transfer of operational duties, he said. Since you're so busy, we'd love to take some pressure off. I lifted the first page. The title made me laugh inside my mouth. Family Advancement Agreement? Laura had named our decoy the same thing. Parallel paths, different destinations. I squinted at the text, then slid on my $8 readers. Light's awful over here, I said, standing. Do you mind if I read this in the office? Mark hesitated, then recovered. Of course. He was proud of his office. All men like Mark are. Their home office smelled like leather and late payments. On the desk sat a laser printer still warm to the touch, a wastebasket full of curled paper snakes, and, bless the anonymous texter, a post-it stuck to a monitor. Claire M., earweight 17. A birthday she hated, a middle name she never used. Password hint, I thought, snapping a photo as if of nothing. I leafed the stack slowly, my finger hovering over clauses written in lawyerese light enough to fool a sleepy retiree. Transfer. Assign. Authorize. ugly verbs dressed in Sunday clothes. From the doorway, Claire's voice. "Everything okay, Mom?" I smiled without turning. "Just making sure the commas are in the right places." "Do you trust us?" The question wobbled. She wanted me to say yes so she could forget what she was asking. "I love you," I said, still reading. "Trust is earned." I pulled out my phone, pretended to text my accountant, and instead snapped photos, one page at a time, the shutter muffled by the tote's canvas. When I hit the last page, I lifted it, and there it was, the penultimate sheet, innocently titled, "Durable Power of Attorney." My breath left my body in a soft, private exhale. I photographed the heading, the agent line, Mark Reynolds in neat serif font, and the signature block pre-labeled with my full legal name. They'd typed it, so all I had to do was sign where the sticker glowed. Back at the table, I set the stack down like it was nothing more than recipes. "It's a lot," I said. "I'll need to review with my accountant Monday." Mark's smile cracked. "It's pretty standard, Mia. We even have a notary ready if you want to get it done tonight." "Tonight?" I repeated, feigning surprise. "What's the rush?" Claire's fingers worried the edge of a napkin. "No rush," she said, then contradicted herself. "It would just make things easier." I let the silence stretch until the air grew taut. Then the doorbell rang, a bright, cheerful chime. "Surprise dessert," Pastor Ruth sang from the foyer like a Broadway cameo. Behind her, Jamal, the church's lanky videographer, cradled a DSLR like a baby grand. "We heard a rumor there were pies in need of praise." Claire froze. Mark's jaw locked. I clapped my hands. "Perfect timing," I said brightly. Come in. Come in. Taste test the bourbon glaze." Pastor Ruth greeted everyone by name, asked casual questions only a community builder knows how to ask. Jamal drifted toward the bar cart, testing lighting. His lens took in the twin bottles, the untouched glasses, the fountain pen poised beside the POA. I sliced tarts and handed out forks. "Mark," I said, "would you grab me a water from the kitchen?" When he left the room, I slipped the recorder from my pocket and set it under my plate. Mike facing the papers. I tapped the stack twice as if tidying. The mic woke, its tiny red eyes steady as a heartbeat. Mark returned, practiced smile restored. "So?" he said, placing the water beside my hand. "Shall we?" I lifted the fountain pen and rotated it between my fingers, letting its weight say, "I'm considering." Then I set it down. "Monday," I repeated. "I'll run this by my accountant. If it's as simple as you say, we'll make it official." He started to protest. I raised a palm. "I'm a baker, not a fool." The camera in my tote watched his lips thin. The recorder heard the whisper he tried to swallow. "We don't have until Monday." "What was that?" Pastor Ruth asked, all innocent sparkle. "Nothing," Mark said too quickly. But it was something. And now I had it. On tape, on film, on paper. Back home, I slid the recorder into my desk and played the last 15 minutes. The capture was clean. The doorbell, the introductions, the shuffle of paper, and Mark's fatal murmur. I backed it up, labeled it, and saved 2 copies. One on a thumb drive shaped like a cinnamon roll Jamal had gifted me. One on a cloud Laura controlled. Then I uploaded the photos of the POA and texted them to Laura with one line. "Sharp enough to cut." Her reply landed 30 seconds later. "Razor." I poured tea, watched the steam turn my kitchen window to milk, and let my hands finally tremble. Not from fear, from readiness. The crust had set. The filling was hot. One more pass in the oven, and the whole thing would hold its shape when sliced in public. Tomorrow, I thought, flipping open the notebook to add one last step. Step 8. Invite them to the tasting, a charity gala a microphone, a room full of donors who loved a good story and hated a bad man. If revenge is best served cold, I'd plate it chilled, with bourbon pecan for dessert. I had enough evidence to ruin them in private, but private wasn't enough. They'd tried to steal not just my business, but my name, my place in the world I'd built with flour, fire, and the kind of stubborn that doesn't come with instructions. A theft like that deserved light. Hot, unflinching light. I knew exactly where it would happen. The annual Harvest Hearts Gala, a charity dinner for the city's food bank. Tickets were $500 a seat, the room draped in fairy lights and smug benevolence. My bakery had donated desserts for 5 years straight. I had a standing slot on the program, 3 minutes at the mic to share a baker's perspective on giving. This year, I'd give them something else. Not everyone in that ballroom mattered, but the right someone did. The mayor's wife, who loved my bourbon pecan tarts, the city's top business reporter, whose beat was community entrepreneurship, 3 members of the food bank board who also sat on the Chamber of Commerce's ethics committee, and of course, Mark and Claire, who couldn't resist being photographed supporting local causes. I'd make sure they had front row seats to my speech and to their own undoing. Public speaking is just storytelling with better shoes. You start with a smile, you slip in the knife under the laugh, and by the time they feel the sting, you've already twisted. My plan was simple. Open with gratitude, pivot to a cautionary tale about trust, then roll a short video, a carefully edited montage courtesy of Jamal. It would start innocuous. Clips of my bakery, my staff, my community events. Then it would cut to my kitchen last week. Mark's hand sliding the folder across the table, the pages turning to reveal durable power of attorney, and his whisper, "We don't have until Monday." On screen, in high definition, his lips would form the words. No narration. Just silence and that sentence. They couldn't see this coming. To keep them unsuspecting, I called Claire 2 days before the gala. "I'd love for you two to be my guests this year," I said warmly. "It's for a good cause, and I think the networking would be great for Mark." She hesitated, but greed loves a camera. "That's generous, Mom. We'd be happy to?" Mark's voice faintly in the background. "Black tie, right?" "Yes," I said. "And bring your best smile. The press will be there." A good takedown needs witnesses who will remember exactly what they saw. I enlisted Laura, my attorney, to sit at table 4, close enough to watch, far enough to avoid being pulled into their panic. Pastor Ruth would arrive early and just happen to be seated beside the mayor's wife. Jamal got a vendor's badge so he could roam freely with his DSLR and a gimbal. His job, capture their faces as the video played. I wasn't naive. If Mark suspected anything, he might try to turn the tables. So I made sure every piece of my evidence, audio, video, document scans, was duplicated and preloaded into 3 scheduled emails. 1 to my lawyer, 1 to the business reporter, and 1 to the Chamber of Commerce chair. The send time, 9:15 p.m., 5 minutes after my speech began. If anything happened to me or the footage, the files would go out anyway. I practiced in my bakery after hours, standing where the bread rack met the wall mirror. "Trust," I'd begin, letting the words settle. It's the yeast in every recipe for community. Without it, nothing rises. A pause, a glance toward the invisible Mark and Claire. But trust can be stolen, sometimes by strangers, sometimes by family. I'd tell the crowd about a friend whose children tried to sign away her life's work under the guise of helping. I'd describe how betrayal wears polite clothes and comes with a pen, and then I'd say, "It's one thing to hear about it, it's another to see it." The lights would dim, the screen would glow, the room would hold its breath. The day before the gala, I delivered a dozen bourbon pecan tarts to Claire's door with a note. Thank you for being part of this year's celebration. Let's make the night unforgettable, a small kindness to soften them, keep them leaning toward me instead of away. If you're going to gut someone in public, you wear red. Not the soft red of autumn leaves, but the deep, assertive red of a stop sign. I chose a silk dress that caught the light with every move. My necklace was a simple gold key, my bakery's front door, cast by a jeweler friend. Let them see what I was keeping. I walked Jasper at dawn, breathing in the cool air like it might steady my pulse. At home, I reviewed the footage one last time, my fingers drumming on the counter as Mark's whisper filled the kitchen. We don't have until Monday. Neither did they. When the Uber pulled up that night, I stepped in with my tote, button camera removed, replaced with the printed program, and a flash drive in a velvet pouch. The gala's ballroom doors swung open, spilling warm light across the carpet. The air smelled of lilies and ambition. Tonight, I thought, tightening my grip on the pouch, the crust will shatter, and everyone will see the filling. The ballroom lights dimmed just as the MC handed me the microphone. A polite round of applause rippled through the crowd, camera flashes winking like restless fireflies. Mark and Claire sat exactly where I wanted them, center table, directly in my line of sight. Claire's smile was tight, polite. Mark's was calculated. "Good evening," I began, letting the words settle. "For years, my bakery has supported this gala because I believe in feeding people, in nourishing trust. And trust, my friends, is the yeast that makes a community rise." A few nods. The mayor's wife leaned forward, smiling. "But, as any baker knows," I continued, "if the yeast is bad, nothing good can come of it. Sometimes bad yeast sneaks in disguised as something wholesome. Sometimes it wears the face of family." The air shifted. A few curious glances darted toward Mark and Claire. I smiled warmly, as though I hadn't just sliced the first layer of the cake. "Let me tell you a story. A story about a woman who spent her life building something beautiful, only to have someone try to take it away. Not through hard work, not through honesty, but with a pen. And a signature." Mark stiffened. Claire's eyes flickered to him. "Of course," I said lightly. "It's one thing to hear about it, it's another to see it." I nodded toward the AV tech in the corner. "Roll the clip." The screens lit up with footage of my bakery, sunlight through the front window, my staff laughing over a tray of fresh bread, children pressing their noses to the glass case. Then, the scene shifted. My kitchen table last week. Mark sliding the folder across. The words, "durable power of attorney," visible on the page. His voice, clear, unmistakable. "We don't have until Monday." Gasps rippled through the room. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. The camera lingered just long enough for every guest to see the panic bloom in their eyes. The screen went black. Silence. I stepped forward. "This isn't just about me. It's about how easily trust can be exploited. It's about the importance of protecting what you've built. From strangers, yes, but also from the people you never thought would hurt you." I let my gaze sweep the room, landing squarely back on them. "I've taken steps to make sure my bakery, my home, and my life remain in my hands. And for those wondering, no, the people in this story did not succeed, and they never will." The applause started slowly. Table 4, where my attorney sat, then the mayor's wife, then the business reporter. Soon it was the whole room. Mark and Claire didn't move. When the applause died, I leaned in for the final cut. "I donated tonight's dessert in honor of the food bank, but I named the recipe after something else entirely. I smiled. We're calling it the betrayal crumble. Sweet on the outside, but once you break it open, the truth falls apart. Laughter erupted, sharper than sugar. As I left the stage, the business reporter was already on her phone. Jamal's camera caught Claire standing abruptly, Mark whispering something furious in her ear. I didn't need to hear it. I'd already won. The files I'd scheduled earlier had been sent. The Chamber of Commerce would open them in minutes. By morning, Mark's firm would be questioning his integrity. Claire's social circle would see her in an entirely new light. I didn't look back as I walked toward the bar, the weight of the flash drive gone from my bag, the air lighter in my lungs. Trust, I thought, lifting a glass of champagne, really does make things rise. But betrayal? Betrayal makes for a hell of a show. By the next morning, the storm had already broken. At 7:42 a.m., Laura forwarded me a link. The city's business reporter had posted an article titled, "Local Bakery Owner Outsmarts Attempted Hostile Takeover by Her Own Family." My phone buzzed nonstop. Messages of support from customers, former employees, and even old high school classmates I hadn't heard from in years. Mark's law firm released a short statement. Effective immediately, Mark Dalton is no longer associated with our practice. The Chamber of Commerce Ethics Committee announced they were reviewing Claire's eligibility for her recently appointed role in a local nonprofit board. By noon, the video clip from the gala, courtesy of Jamal, was trending in our city's Facebook groups. Someone had set it to dramatic piano music, and the comments section was a flood of popcorn emojis and words like legend, queen, and don't mess with bakers. I didn't just get sympathy, I got business. By mid-afternoon, 3 corporate catering orders came in. The mayor's wife called to ask if I could handle desserts for an upcoming fundraiser. Even Pastor Ruth stopped by for a coffee and left with a box of betrayal crumble, winking as she paid. As for Mark and Claire, they vanished from the neighborhood overnight. I heard whispers. Mark trying to freelance, but no one trusting him with a contract. Claire staying off social media entirely. Every time someone asked, I just smiled and said, I wish them well. It wasn't a lie. I did wish them well, far away from me. But the real satisfaction wasn't in their public disgrace. It was in walking into my bakery the next morning, smelling the bread, hearing the bell over the door, and knowing everything in here, every loaf, every tile, every story, was still mine. Because I fought for it, because I refused to be silent. Some people think revenge is about destroying the other person. But for me, it was about reclaiming my place, my voice, my peace. The night of the gala wasn't just an ending, it was a beginning. I don't know where Mark and Claire will end up, and honestly, I don't care. What I do know is that if anyone ever tries to take what I've built again, they'd better bring more than a pen and a fake smile. Because this time, they'll know. They're not just up against a baker. They're up against someone who already knows how sweet victory tastes. Some betrayals cut deeper when they come from family. Have you ever been in a situation where someone you trusted tried to take what's yours? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And if you enjoyed this story, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next twist.